Hello, my friends. Sorry I haven't been making videos as much as I used to. I'm back in school now and been just a little distracted lately, but today I want to tell you about something that really kind of struck me in a class that I'm taking, which is a religious studies class. And we're sort of going over the history of the beginnings of Christianity, which should be interesting. I've been researching that on my own lately, so this should be interesting. But what I want to talk about is, in the very first class that we had, we went over the key terms that we'll be exploring during the semester. And the biggest key term is obviously religion. But the weird thing that struck me is that we did not define the term religion. The professor made it very clear that the term religion would not be defined in that class. And then if we're looking for a sort of a clear answer about what religion is, then we're in the wrong class. And it's funny to me that a class under the name of religious studies can't even tell you what the word religion means. Now, of course, we're going to be exploring definitions given historically by other thinkers and religious groups. Like we'll look at what the early Christians believed religion meant, or we'll look at what religion meant to certain writers that were influential in the early Christian period. But we're not going to define it ourselves, and the professor's not going to define it for you. We can only look at other examples and analyze those examples from a standpoint of not knowing ourselves what the subject is, really. If we don't know what the word religion means to us, then we don't even know what the subject really means. And when we start looking at these writers, all we can do in these classes is adopt their perspective and analyze their writing from whatever perspective they're giving. And this is the same, not just in this religion class, but in almost all of the philosophy classes that I would say every philosophy class that I've taken. The important ideas, the important concepts like truth, like love, like religion, like virtue, the important concepts. The concepts, like the cornerstones of a culture, really, are these ideas. And yet, we are never given a clear definition. We're never taught to come to our own conclusions. What we're taught is to analyze the thoughts of others and basically vet them for consistency, or to compare and contrast them. We're told to understand what other people think about it, but we're never told to come to our own conclusions. And I think that this is a serious problem in the West, because what institutions are left to tell people that this is how it is on the contentious issues, the issues that different people disagree on? Because that's sort of the nature of issues like religion and like truth or like love, the culturally foundational concepts. That's the basis of a civilization. And different people, different civilizations, different cultures have answers to these questions. Like if you went back in time and you asked a Greek back in antiquity what it meant to be pious, or what it meant to be virtuous or noble, they would have an answer for you. They wouldn't have to say, oh, well, historically this person thought this, or the Persians, they thought this, and the Hittites, I think they thought this, but I'm not sure what it means for me. No, they would have an answer for you, because the Greek culture was strong. And a strong culture has its own answers to these questions. And what does it say about our culture, our civilization, when we refuse to answer these questions? I mean, we used to have, like, the Christian church, but that was not native to us. And if you go far enough back, you find the undisturbed Germanic peoples before the alien elements came through and took over those areas. The Germanic people also had a similar worldview to the Greeks, where if you went to an average Germanic person, they would have an answer for you for what is good, what is noble, what does it mean to be pious. They would say something like, to worship the gods or devote yourself to the gods or whatever. But that in and of itself would translate to very specific qualities that they found to be virtuous. It was actually meaningful. It actually had some significance in their lives. But now we are basically taught to not come to our own conclusions about these things. We're taught that we can analyze other people, other cultures, and thinking about this has reminded me of, like, a story that I heard from England. I think it was England. It might have been Canada, some cucked country. They, within like a few weeks, I think, if I'm not getting the story wrong, within a few weeks, they banned Christian prayer before public assemblies, like a town hall meeting or something like that. But then within a few weeks of banning Christian prayer, a Muslim mayor somewhere led their town hall meeting or public assembly, whatever it was, with a Muslim prayer. And all of these English city councilors were like bending their heads and submitting, like, oh yes, I must show respect for this. Whereas if you tried to have a Christian do that, no fucking way. But I think that is itself a symptom of what we're seeing here, which is that white Europeans, whatever you may think about Christianity, and I know I don't like Christianity, but white Europeans see Christianity as part of their history and their culture, their people, whereas the Islamic religion is still alien and other to them. So they get to have their culture, they get to have their say and decide these big questions. Because look at Islam, they definitely have this sort of thing under control, where they have institutions out there that are teaching people exactly what they should think about things like love or things like virtue or things like religion. They actually have a serious cultural strength to them, where they're willing to plant their flag in the ground and say, this is what we think as a people, this is what our culture is. But the English, since they see Christianity as part of themselves, they've done this thing where it's like what we're doing in university, where they're not willing to plant that flag in the ground anymore. It's totally private for them. I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with that, but it just bothers me that it's like, for white Europeans, for Western societies, our major institutions, which are the universities, our last major cultural institutions that are supposed to be the things that get our people to coalesce and agree upon these fundamental things that found a culture. Those universities are teaching us the exact opposite, which is that we shouldn't have an opinion, that all we can do is look to other groups or look to history to tell us what to think. We're never taught at all that that we ourselves are a cohesive culture and that we have a say on these matters. and that not every group is going to agree on these things, but that as a group, you're only really a cultural group if you can agree on these things. And like going back to the ancient Greeks, it's going to be different for different groups. Like India is going to have a different sense of religion than the Greeks. The Germanic people are going to have a different sense of religion from the Arabs. It's just that these sorts of cultural foundational concepts are particular to a people. They're particular to a certain type, a certain way of life, a certain type of human. And that each type should have its own expression. But, back to the original question, what does it say about a certain type, namely the white European? What does it say about their type when they're no longer willing to plant their flag in the soil and say, this is what we are, this is what we think, this is how we live our lives? And it's different from what other people think, but we have an answer to those things. We should have an answer to those questions. That's particular to us. It's not going to be universal, is the point. And the fact that university, it's right in their name, universal universities, the fact that that is one of their founding core ideas, that every concept needs to be universal. That's what has got us into a lot of trouble, I think, because we've lost the fact that these questions come from a certain perspective. Religion, truth, virtue, they always come from a certain perspective. And you can't have a universal perspective of these things. You can't have a universal understanding of these things. It's always going to be a matter of perspective. And we, the white Europeans, should have our own perspective on these things. We shouldn't be taught that we have to understand the universal truth of these things, and we need to compare and contrast other things that we disagree with, that are antithetical to our spirit. No, we should have our own answers. We could definitely study other cultures and stuff, but realize that you have your own, and you have your own particular spirit as a European. But we're not taught any of that in universities, sadly. All right, thanks for watching.